Beloved children's educator Fred Rogers is interviewed by a cynical reporter. And during an innocent chat about his life and work, the reporter observed, "It must have been hard for your kids to have had a dad such as you." Fred Rogers was a wonderful father who zealously guarded his work-life balance before we were even talking about that idea. And the reporter's fake or curious accusation was actually just a journalistic fishing expedition, a lame attempt to get a rise out of the unstintingly compassionate Fred Rogers. Mr. Rogers paused for a very long time, and then he thanked the reporter for his thoughtful observation. He told him it was so very kind of him to acknowledge that parenting is a real challenge. You see, no one can hurt your feelings without your consent. No one can make you angry or disappointed or intimidated or jealous or any other negative emotion that can afflict you without your permission. You can choose to see things differently, and this concept is called reframing. Mr. Rogers wasn't using some pop psychology or pretending to see something that wasn't there. He just dug deep, he looked deeply, and he found some insight into the reporter's questions. Rather than reacting to the reporter's hostility, he ignored it and focused on the little bit of compassion he saw in his heart. 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, "We look not at the things that are seen, but to the things that are not seen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are not seen, they're eternal." Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago and the former chief of staff to President Barack Obama, once made the statement, "You never let a serious crisis go to waste." And what I mean by that is an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. Now, while that has some very frightening inferences when you think of politicians and some of the things they do, it also has some encouraging considerations for us as well. So often in life, it isn't until we experience a real crisis that we really understand who we are and what's really important and maybe some things that aren't that important. As individuals, as families, as a church, and as a nation, sometimes it takes a crisis just to bring us back to our senses. During the past few weeks, it's encouraging to me to think that there haven't been any riots, no protests, no pillaging or plundering in the United States. Crime has actually went down, not up, over the last few weeks. In fact, aside from the media, a nation that recently was very divided has shown a lot of signs of really coming together. Carnival Cruise Line told President Trump, "We can match those big Navy hospital ships with some fully staffed cruise ships." GM and Ford Motors said, "Hold our cars, watch this. We can make ventilators where we were making cars by next week." Construction companies have said, "Here, we have extra masks for the medical staff and doctors." Restaurants and schools have said, "We've got kitchens and staff, we'll feed the kids." NHL and NBA players are writing checks to pay the arena staff during postponed seasons. Churches are holding online services and finding creative ways to connect with their community. Women and children are making homemade masks and handing out snacks to truckers. Breweries are making sanitizer out of the leftover ingredients. And we thought we couldn't live without baseball, hockey, and NASCAR, or going to beaches and restaurants, but instead we're ordering takeout and keeping these businesses alive. What they didn't count on was America saying, "Watch this." I think a Japanese admiral had it right in the middle of World War II. Out in the Pacific, he said, "I think we have awakened a sleeping giant." Well, America is a sleeping giant, and it takes a crisis to really see how America can come together in difficult times. But the church is also a sleeping giant, and you'd be surprised how the church comes together in difficult times as well. And speaking of difficult times, I'm not so sure how difficult this really is. The traffic is way down. Gas is definitely more affordable than it's been in years. Places are extending the payment of bills by banks and mortgage companies and utilities and credit card companies, and even the IRS has given us till July 15th. Kids are at home with their families. Parents are at home with their kids. Fast food has been replaced by home-cooked meals. Hectic schedules have now given way to afternoon naps. The air does seem a bit cleaner, and the world seems a lot quieter. People are conscious of hygiene and health again, like they should have been all along, and we finally listen to authorities and give them a little bit of respect. Money doesn't seem to make the world go around as much as we might have thought it did before, and things have slowed down. Places are closing early so people can get home to their family and friends, and we now have time to finally stop and smell the roses along the way. And maybe best of all is that we've become closer to God, not just on Sundays, but on every days. Chuck Swindoll famously wrote many years ago, "The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life." Attitude to me is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education or money or circumstances or failures, more important than successes or what other people think or say or do. It's more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, or a home. And the remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we'll embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing that we can do is play on the one string that we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. You are in charge of your attitude. In Philippians 4, Paul wrote this. He said, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say rejoice. "Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand, so don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Finally, brothers, whatsoever is true, whatsoever is honorable, whatsoever is just, whatsoever is pure, whatsoever is lovely, whatsoever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Think about these things. Maybe your mind has been focused on a lot of other things. You're concerned about where the stock market is today, or you're concerned about friends and their health, or your children, or your education, or your job future. Maybe you're concerned about a lot of different things. But Paul said, think on these things, things that are true and just and honorable, pure and lovely and commendable. Think about these things. Let your mind dwell on these things. And then he concludes by saying, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. May God bless you.